In our last class, I gave you several new words for food, right? So a lot of new vocabulary. But this class I want to give you a context where we can use those words. So this is an example of how we go and ask for prices when we go to the market, right? When we go shopping. So let's see. Let's begin with these three new words. Supermercado means supermarket. Mercado is market, right? Very similar word. And feria, the word feria, is also a market, but it usually means a street market, okay? So when we go to the street market and we have all these stalls, right, for the vegetables, the fruits, and all the like, that is what we call feria, right? Then we can add many adjectives to the word feria. For example, if it is a market that is moving from one place to another, right, that is never always in the same place, we call it feria ambulante. Ambulante means that it's changing places, right? Feria callejera is a street market. Feria de autos is a car show, right? But you don't need actually to learn all those adjectives, right? Just the word feria is enough. And when you are going shopping, just the word feria usually implies the street market, okay? So remember, we have supermercado for supermarket, mercado for the market, and feria for market, but usually it is the street market, okay? Okay, let's begin with our first sentence. It is: Hoy es día de feria. Vamos de compras. Hoy es día de feria. Vamos de compras. This means today is day of market day. Let's go shopping, okay? De compras means shopping, to go out shopping. So vamos means let's go. It's imperative for the verb to go, so let's go. Also, the verb vamos, it's not only the imperative, but it is also the present tense for the pronoun we, for go. So this sentence can mean also we go shopping, okay? We go shopping, or we are going shopping, right? But here I used it with the intention of speaking in the imperative. So let's go shopping. ¿Cuánto cuesta el litro de leche? ¿Cuánto cuesta el litro de leche? This means how much costs the liter of milk? How much does a liter of milk cost, right? And here I want to show you three ways of asking for a price, right? And none of these is more common than the other, right? The three of them are very frequently used by everybody. For example, I can go to the market and I can ask for a price this way, and then I will go somewhere else and I will ask for a price this way, and then perhaps I don't know, this way, okay? So let's learn these. ¿Cuánto cuesta means how much costs, right? How much does something cost? ¿Cuánto vale is how much is it worth, right? Because vale comes from the verb valer. That means to be worth so much, right? Something. And ¿cuánto están is how much is it, right? So these ways are ways of asking for a price, asking for how much does something cost, right? And none of these is awkward. But the three of them are very frequently used, right? So just remember, because you can hear one of these at any moment, okay? So, ¿cuánto cuesta el litro de leche? How much does a liter of milk cost? ¿Cuánto vale el kilo de carne? ¿Cuánto vale el kilo de carne? This means, okay, how much worth the kilo of meat, right? And we said that carne is meat in general, right? But usually when we are talking about, when we are shopping and we talk about carne, we usually imply beef, right? Because if we want to talk about any other kind of meat, we would say cordero for lamb or mutton, we would say pescado for fish, cerdo for pork, pollo for chicken, right? So usually when we say meat, the word carne, we are implying it is beef, okay? ¿A cuánto están las manzanas? How much are the apples, right? So, ¿cuánto cuesta? ¿Cuánto vale? And ¿a cuánto están? Or ¿a cuánto está? Right? Depend. If you want to ask something plural, you use the N, right? Sorry, I did erase it. You add the N for plural and you delete the N if you want to ask something in singular. How much is this? How much are these, or how much is this? ¿A cuánto está? Or ¿a cuánto están? So these are three ways of asking how much does something cost, right? ¿Tiene pan fresco para vender? Do you have fresh bread for sale? Tiene is a verb to have for the second person of the singular, for you, tú, right? But in this case we are using the second person of the singular, but the formal, right? So the formal, remember that in Spanish, the formal way of addressing somebody is usted, right? And not necessarily it means somebody hierarchically superior, right? Because, for example, if we go shopping, we are addressing somebody that we do not know, somebody we are not acquainted with, and then we also use the formal way of addressing somebody, right? And remember that usted, that is the formal you, conjugates the same as he or as she, right? So, tiene would be the conjugation for he or she, right? The third person of the singular. Él tiene. But here we are using it for the usted, which is the you plural, right? The second person of the singular, formal. So, do you have fresh bread for sale? Right? We can omit the for sale, or we can include it. So remember that in Spanish we usually first say the noun pan, bread, and later comes the adjective fresco, in this case fresh, right? So do you have fresh bread for sale? Para means for, vender means to sell or selling, right? So this would be for sale. ¿Tiene pan fresco para vender? Or simply, ¿tiene pan fresco? When we are shopping and we want to know if they have something, we simply ask, ¿tiene pan fresco? Or ¿tiene manzanas? Do you have apples? ¿Cuánto cuesta cada uno? ¿Cuánto cuesta cada uno? How much costs, how much costs each one. So, ¿cuánto cuesta cada uno? Remember, the word cada means each. Uno, of course, means one. So, how much does each one cost? Right? So, when we are going to the market or when we are shopping or buying whatever, and we want to buy something by the unit, we ask, ¿cuánto cuesta cada uno? Or if what we are asking for is a feminine noun, right? We would ask cada una. For example, if we want to buy apples by the unit, apple, manzana, is a feminine noun, right? La manzana. So we would ask, ¿cuánto cuesta cada una? So instead of uno, we would say una with a. ¿Dónde puedo encontrar aceitunas? ¿Dónde puedo encontrar aceitunas? So, if we are looking for olives and we don't find them, we can ask any of the stalls in the market, where can I find olives? Right? And we are not specifying any type of olive. We are just speaking about olives in general. So we do not add an article here to the word olives, right? So as you can see here, there is no article before olives, aceitunas. Where can I find olives? Right? So puedo is the verb poder, which means to can, right? To can or to be able to. Conjugated in present tense for the first person of the singular, for I, yo, okay? And our last sentence is, por favor, deme 2,5 kilos de uvas. Por favor, deme 2,5 kilos de uvas. This means please. The word for please in Spanish is por favor. It's actually two words, okay? Please give me 2 kilos and a half, or 2 kilos and a half of grapes, right? So, deme means give me. You see the me, the complement me is me, to me, right? This comes from the verb de, right? It's the verb dar. The verb dar is the verb to give. Yes? The verb to give in the imperative for the formal person, for formal you, that is usted, is de. Usted de. You give, right? Imperative for usted. And give me would be de me. Here. That's why we say, por favor, deme 2,5 kilos de uvas. Okay? Please give me 2 kilos and a half of grapes. So this is the end. I hope these sentences have helped you to seeing how we can use these words for food that we learned in the previous class, and also to practice every time I show you some sentences. I really hope that you can assimilate better the structure of the Spanish sentences. So I'll see you in the next class. In this lesson I wanted to show you some more words for food and eating. But when I started writing the list, actually I kept on writing lists of eating objects and articles, and I didn't write any for foods, right? So we leave that for another moment. But all these words are words related to our eating, right? Like the cutlery, the fork, the knife, the dining room, and all these are common words and useful words. So let's begin reading them. I'll show you how to pronounce them, right? And later I will show you some sentences using some of these, so we start learning and practicing them, okay? Let's begin with the first one. For plate, the plate where we eat is plato, right? Easy word, plato. Then for the glass, we have vaso. Vaso is the glass, right? But vaso can also be a tumbler, a plastic tumbler, right? Vaso. So vaso has no reference to the word glass as in English, right? Glass means also a glass made of glass, yeah? Copa means cup, but copa actually is a cup that has this kind of a base like the champagne or wine glass, okay? That kind of cup. Then the cup for drinking milk, or what we call mug as well, is called taza in Spanish, okay? Taza. This is the cup for drinking milk, yeah, the one that has a handle, yeah? We have cubiertos, this is a cutlery, yeah? Cubiertos. So cubiertos is generic. It implies the fork, the knife, the spoon, right? Mantel. Mantel is tablecloth. Servilleta is the napkin, right? Servilleta can be the paper napkin, can be a cloth napkin, right? So servilleta is quite generic. Comedor is the dining room. The word comedor comes from the word comer. Comer is to eat, okay? The verb comer means to eat. So comedor is the dining room where we eat. Mesa is table. Silla is chair. The word for fork is tenedor. Tenedor. A knife is un cuchillo. Cuchillo. Okay? Or cuchillo. For spoon we have cuchara. Cuchara. 3 syllables. See how this R is not the rough sound of the R. It is not R, right? Why? Because it is in the middle of the word and it is not doubled, right? So it's a smooth, the softer R. Cuchara. For bottle we have botella. Botella. And to serve, when we serve the food or to help ourselves, the word or the verb is servir. Servir. For example, I will serve lunch. Voy a servir el almuerzo. Or I will help myself. Me voy a servir. The word cocina is kitchen. Cocina. For pot, where we cook, right? Where we cook beans, for example, is olla. Olla. A pan, where we would cook a steak, right, is sartén. Sartén. It's the flat one, right? The flat pan. Heladera is refrigerator. 4 syllables. Heladera. Heladera. And the tray, sorry, the word for tray is like this, right? The word for tray is bandeja. Sorry. Sorry. So, bandeja is tray, right? Where we, for example, we will carry some plates and glasses to the table in a tray, okay? In a bandeja. The word to pour is verter. For example, to pour some water in our glass, right? The word is verter. Voy a verter agua. I will pour some water. Okay? We can also say, however, to serve water, right? Servir agua, or any other drink. But the exact word that corresponds to the word to pour is the verb verter. Actually, it sounds perhaps very formal in Spanish when we use the verb verter. However, it is perfectly correct. Volcar is to spill. So if we are serving some water or pouring some water and we spill some water, we would say volqué agua. I spilled water. Volcar. And if we are eating some spaghetti and we splash our clothes with the gravy, the verb to splash is salpicar. Salpicar, right? We would say me salpiqué la ropa. I splashed my clothes. Okay? To fry is freír. Freír. You can see it belongs to the group of verbs that end in ir, right? IR. Comer belongs to the group of verbs that end in er. Cocinar, which means to cook, belongs to the group of verbs ending in ar. Hervir, which means to boil. To boil belongs to the group of verbs ending in ir. So we have freír, to fry. Hervir, to boil, yes. Cocinar means to cook. Calentar means to warm up, right? Calentar belongs to the group of verbs ending in ar. Asar means to roast. Asar, group of verbs ending in ar. Hornear is to bake. Group of verbs ending in ar. And enfriar is to cool down, or enfriar, cool down. Cool down. So we will say, eat your food quickly or it will cool down. Come tu comida rápidamente or ya, o se va a enfriar. Enfriar, to cool down, okay? So, hornear, we bake a bread. Horneamos un pan. Asar, we roast some meat. Asamos carne. When we say something in Spanish, the word some, we omit it. We just say the object without any article whatsoever. So, asamos carne, which literally means we roast meat, would be we roast some meat, okay? Calentar, for example, we warm up our milk. Calentamos la leche. Cocinar, to cook. Cocinamos la comida. We cook our food, right? Cocinamos nuestra comida. We boil some water. Hervimos agua. We fry some potatoes. Freímos papa, or freímos patatas, right? The word for potato, there are two words in Spanish. The word patata, used in Spain and some other countries, and the word papa, used in many other Latin American countries, okay? So, before we finish this class, I want to give you the articles for these words, okay? Not for the verbs, because the verbs have no article, but for the nouns. So, let's use red. The word plato is masculine. El plato, right? The plate. The word for glass, vaso, is also masculine. El vaso. Almost always the words ending in O are masculine and the words ending in A are feminine, okay? So, la copa would be feminine. La taza, feminine. Remember, taza is a cup, like cup for drinking milk, the one that has a handle, okay? Usually made of porcelain or ceramic or chinaware. So, cubiertos is plural here, but it's masculine, okay? Los cubiertos, the cutlery. El mantel, masculine. La servilleta, for the napkin, feminine. El comedor, for the dining room. This is masculine. El comedor. The word for table is feminine. La mesa, feminine. The word for chair is also feminine. La silla. The word for fork is masculine, okay? El tenedor. Usually, when they end in R, you look at the last vowel, okay? If the last vowel is an O, it's usually masculine, right? And if it were feminine, it would probably end with A. It would be hora, okay, with an A after the R. The word for knife, cuchillo, is masculine. Cuchara for spoon is la cuchara, feminine. La botella, the bottle, is feminine. Servir means to serve. It's a verb, so it's neither feminine nor masculine. The word for cocina is feminine. La olla, the pot, is feminine. La sartén, this one does not end in A, but it does not end in O either. La sartén is feminine. La heladera, right? The refrigerator is feminine as well. La bandeja, feminine, for the tray. Verter, okay, all these are verbs, right? So these are neither feminine nor masculine, right? So here you can see whether you have to use the article el or the article la to refer to these nouns, okay? So in our next class I will show you some sentences so we practice some of these words that we have learned today. In our last class I showed you a big list of words that had to do with eating, yes? Now in this class I picked some of those words that have to do with eating, and we will do some sentences so we can practice and also start assimilating and understanding better the structure of the sentences in Spanish and how to speak, right? So let's begin with the first one. And here actually I will show you the expressions and the phrases we use when we talk about setting the table, lifting the table, and the like, okay? So these are some typical Spanish phrases, right? Other than just the vocabulary, the phrases that I want you to pay attention at. So let's begin with es hora de almorzar. Hay que poner la mesa. Es hora de almorzar. Hay que poner la mesa. First, let me tell you one more thing. Here in black, I have written the translation, the meaning of the sentences in Spanish I wrote in blue. And I have written in English in a way that is awkward, right? I know this is awkward. I know we don't speak like this in English, but I wrote it this way because it is more similar to the way of speaking in Spanish, right? So I want you to see, I want you to get in your to register in your mind the structure of the Spanish phrases, right? So that's why please apologize the weird or awkward sentencing in English that you will see written here. Let's see. Es hora de almorzar. it is. So es means it is. Remember that in Spanish the subject pronoun can be and is usually omitted because it is implied in the conjugated verb, okay? So es, right? The it is implied here, so this is it is. Time for lunch, right? When we say es hora de, means it's time for, right? You see, we don't use the article for the word time, right? For hora. We don't say es la hora, it is the time. So, es hora de, remember it means it's time for lunch. Hay que poner la mesa, right? The word for to set the table in Spanish is poner la mesa. So, poner la mesa means to set the table. Literally, poner means to put, right? The verb to put. So this would literally mean to put the table, right? And this is very interesting. Pay attention to this. Hay que. This is a different verbal tense or conjugation that we haven't seen. When we say that something has to be made, right, or you have to do something, but we are not speaking of you, right, we are just speaking like generalizing, that somebody has to do it, right, somebody has to something, or this has to be done. In Spanish, we always use the auxiliary word hay, that comes from the verb haber, right, but it's always the verb, the word hay. It doesn't change. It doesn't change the conjugation according to the person, to the pronoun, to the subject, or to the object. It's the word hay, and later the word que, that means that, okay? Remember that it's not que with a tilde, because que with a tilde means what? Que without the tilde means that, right? So, hay que means that somebody has to set the table, right? That's why I translated this, the table must be set, right? Just for you to understand that here there is not a subject that is mentioned or represented here, right? There is no subject. Hay que, or the verb hay, is a very special conjugation that is not referring to I, you, he, she, it, we, they, you, right? It's just that saying somebody, okay? And this is very used in Spanish, so just remember how to use it. Primero hay que colocar el mantel. Primero hay que colocar el mantel. First, we have to put the tablecloth, or first the tablecloth has to be put, or first you have to put the tablecloth, okay? So, hay que is not pointing at anybody in particular. It's just saying that somebody has to do it, or we have to do it, or it has to be done, right? That's why I translated it here as the tablecloth must be placed, okay? This is awkward in English, you don't speak like this, I know, but in Spanish this is how you speak and this is how you say it, okay? Hay que poner la mesa, hay que hacer algo. We have to do something, but it's said something has to be made, okay? Something has to be done. So, en segundo lugar ponemos los platos. En segundo lugar ponemos los platos. This means in second place, or in the second place, we put, ponemos is the subject pronoun we is implied here, okay? Ponemos los platos, we put the plates. Luego vienen los cubiertos. Luego vienen los cubiertos. Later comes the cutlery, okay? Here, since cubiertos is plural, right? Los cubiertos, then vienen, right, would be come and not comes. Después, los vasos. Afterwards, the glasses. So, as you can see, luego and después are synonyms, okay? See that we can say luego vienen los cubiertos, or simply say luego, coma, los cubiertos, or luego ponemos los cubiertos, right? We are just changing the way of saying the sentence just to make it less repetitive, okay? But we can use any of these ways of saying it indistinctly. Que alguien traiga la bebida. Que alguien traiga la bebida. And this is also another interesting thing in Spanish. When we say que alguien, we are also not pointing our finger to anybody in particular, but we are commanding, we are being imperative, we are saying, somebody bring the drink, okay? We always use for that purpose the word que, right? And not necessarily using alguien, right? For example, we can say, que traiga la bebida, right? Let him bring the drink, que traiga la bebida. Or, yeah, he has to bring the drink, que traiga la bebida. So the word que here at the beginning of the sentence is imperative, right? Traigan la comida. This is also imperative. But here, what the subject pronoun that is implied is vosotros. Sorry, ustedes. Ustedes and vosotros mean the same thing, right? Are synonyms. As I said before, ustedes is the way that is used, the word that is used in Latin America, right? So, traigan is a conjugation of the verb traer, which means to bring, for ustedes, that means you plural, and for ellos, that means they, right? Those both pronouns, they conjugate the same. They and ustedes. So, traigan la comida. Bring the food. If I wanted to say, they bring the food, or make them bring the food, or let them bring the food, okay? I would say, que traigan la comida, right? Because I cannot, if I'm talking about they, I'm not speaking directly to them, right? Because if I were speaking directly to them, they would not be a they would be a you plural, right? So when I'm not speaking to somebody directly, but still I am commanding, I'm being imperative, there we have to use in Spanish the word que, okay? That's why here, que indicates that I'm giving a command, but I'm not talking to anybody in particular, okay? So let's continue here. Solo falta sentarse a la mesa. Solo falta sentarse a la mesa. This means only remains or missing to sit down to or at the table, okay? So, the only thing left is to sit at table. Solo falta sentarse a la mesa. Falta comes from the verb faltar, which means to miss something or something is lacking, right? To lack something. And our last sentence is ahora hay que levantar la mesa, or ahora hay que quitar la mesa. So, to lift the table after we finish eating, to lift the table, that is to take the plates away to the kitchen, the food, the drinks, to wash the fork and knives, right? To clear the table. To clear the table after a meal, in Spanish we say levantar la mesa or quitar la mesa, right? Depending on which country, one is more used than the other way, right? Either levantar la mesa or quitar la mesa. What does levantar mean? Levantar means to lift, and quitar means to remove, right? So, ahora means now. Remember that hay que means that somebody has to do something, but we are not pointing at, we are not using the word somebody and pointing at nobody in particular. So it's like saying something has to be made or done, right? So, levantar, to lift, or quitar, to remove the table. This would be like saying now the table must be lifted, right, or cleared. Or now somebody has to clear the table. Okay? So, the most important thing here I want you to remember is hay que, right? And also the imperative, when we are not talking directly to anybody in particular, when we are not commanding to anybody in particular, we use que, right, at the beginning. And remember, poner la mesa is to set the table, levantar la mesa or quitar la mesa is to clear the table, right, or to lift the table. And well, I hope these sentences have been useful to practice a bit more your Spanish. In our previous class, when we were doing some sentences using words that had to do with eating, we came across this expression, hay que. And it is a very important expression in Spanish and very useful and very frequently used. So I wanted to dedicate one class to talk about it, okay? So, tener que and hay que, they are similar but they are not the same, and I will explain you why. Tener que can be translated in English as somebody has to do something, okay? So, tener, the verb tener, which means to have, would go conjugated into the person, into the subject, right? The somebody, yes? Somebody has to do something. Hay que, here there is not a subject, okay? It's speaking in a general way. It could be translated in English as something has to be made, right? Or like one has to do something. Yes, there is not a subject. It's very abstract or inspecific. We are not talking about anybody in particular. It's not that somebody has to do something. It's one has to do something, okay? Or something has to be made. And this is very much used in Spanish. The structure for these two is the following, okay? You can see it, tener que, but the verb tener, which means to have, goes conjugated. Then comes the verb in infinitive, right? Whatever it is that somebody has to do or to make, right? And then a predicate, in case there is a predicate. It's not necessarily always, okay? And for hay que, it's easier because we don't have to conjugate anything, because the verb hay, right? Hay is a very special and particular and unique conjugation of the verb haber, which is a verb to have, okay? This would be the verb. However, This is a very unique conjugation, and we don't have to change this conjugation whatsoever. It will always be I, que, plus whatever verb in infinitive that it is that has to be made or done, and a predicate in case there is a predicate, okay? So, for example, in the case of tener que, somebody has to do something. Since the verb tener needs to be conjugated, I have conjugated it here for the present tense, right? For the different pronouns. So, I, you, he, we, you plural, they, okay? So, why to you plural? Because vosotros is the you plural used in Spain, and ustedes is the you plural used in Latin America, okay? And they conjugate differently. Ustedes actually conjugates the same as ellos, or they. One more thing. You is tú. There is a formal you in Spanish, which is usted. I spoke of it before, right? Usted. This is the formal you, and it's very much used in Spanish. Not only when we are talking to somebody that is superior hierarchically to us, or somebody who is older than us, right? The elders, we usually address them as usted, but also when we talk to somebody we are not acquainted with. For example, when we go out shopping, okay? When we go shopping, or when we talk to somebody in the street, somebody we are not acquainted with, the polite and correct way of speaking is to address that person as usted, okay? Unless usually children or youngsters among themselves, they don't need to address themselves as usted. They always use the informal you, okay? But amongst adults, when they are unrelated to each other, unacquainted to each other, they use usted, right? The formal you. And usted conjugates as he or she, right? Él. Although usted is a formal tú, however, the conjugation is like él, right? So in this case, it will be usted tiene, okay? You have. So let's see. I have will be yo tengo, tú tienes, él tiene, nosotros tenemos, vosotros tenéis, ustedes tienen, ellos tienen. Okay? So this is a conjugation for the present tense of the verb tener. Okay? That means to have. However, in this phrase, in this use tener que, it has nothing to do with to have. Okay? It means have to do something. Or yes, it has to. It's like in English when we say have to do something, right? Then it can have to do with the verb to have, yeah. So let's see. First sentence. Tengo que ir al baño. Tengo que ir al baño. Remember that the subject pronoun in Spanish is usually omitted because it is implicit in the conjugation of the verb. So, tengo, as you can see here, is present tense conjugation for the first person of the singular, right? Tengo. So, I know that the subject pronoun I or yo is implied here. This is like saying, I have to go to the bathroom, to the toilet, okay? Remember that the word al is an abbreviation of a, el, right? That means to the. El is the masculine article for the noun baño, that means toilet, okay? Toilet or bathroom or restroom. So, I have to go to the toilet, right? Tiene que ir a trabajar, right? So who is the subject here? Tiene is the present tense conjugation for usted or él or ella, okay? This is he, she, or the formal you, right? tiene. So, tiene que ir a trabajar can mean, I can be talking about somebody else and I can be saying, he has to go to work, or she has to go to work, right? He has or she has to go to work. But also, since tiene is also the conjugation for usted, right? The you plural, this can also mean I can be talking to somebody else in a formal way, and I can be saying, you have to go to work, okay? Tenemos que irnos. Tenemos que irnos. So which is the subject now? The subject is we, nosotros. Tenemos is the conjugation for nosotros in present tense, right? So this is we have to leave, right? We have to leave. So look at this. The verb ir is the verb to go, right? But, so ir is verb to go in infinitive, right? But irse, if we add this, if we convert the verb to go into a reflexive verb, it would be as saying in English, to go oneself, right? Then this verb means to leave, right? To leave somewhere, or to leave from somewhere. So that means to go oneself. For example, here, tenemos que irnos. We have to go ourselves, right? This means we have to leave. Irnos, right? If it were me, I had to leave, I would say, tengo que irme. If it were you, you have to leave, I would say, tienes que irte. Okay? Tienen que portarse bien. Tienen que portarse bien. This means literally, you have to behave well, or they have to behave well. Why do I say you or they? Because tienen is the present tense conjugation for ustedes, right? And for ellos, right? So ellos is they, and ustedes is the you plural that is used in Latin America. In Spain they would use vosotros, but it conjugates differently. It would be tenéis, right? So, tienen que portarse bien. Portarse would be the word for behaving, to behave, right? As you can see, it's also a reflexive verb, right? Portarse. So, if I say, I have to behave well, I would say, tengo que portarme bien, right? If I want to say, nosotros tenemos que, we have to behave well, I would say, nosotros tenemos que portarnos bien, okay? Reflexive verb, the ending is different. So that means to behave well, right? So it would be, since it is reflexive, it would be like saying to behave oneself well. And to behave wrong or badly would be portarse mal, right? The word mal means wrong or evil, right? So, next, alguien tiene que limpiar esto. Alguien tiene que limpiar esto. This means somebody has to clean this, or to wipe this. Tiene, you see, the subject is alguien, somebody, right? Somebody. So when the subject is somebody, this conjugates as what pronoun? As which pronoun? As he, right? somebody has, he has, okay? In Spanish it's the same. Tiene is the conjugation for the third person of the singular, right? Él tiene, he has. So, somebody has to clean this, right? I'm translating the word que as to. Actually, the word que usually means that. But here, for the case of translating these sentences, que takes the place of the word to in English, right? In an English sentence, okay? Todos tienen que colaborar. Todos tienen que colaborar. Everybody, todos means everybody. Look at this. There's a difference between todo and todos. The word todo without the S, right? Like here, todo means everything, right? Everything, todo, for objects. And if we add an S, todos means everybody, for persons, for people, okay? And so masculine with an O is for male, right? Or also generic, when we are not specifying males or females. But if we want to speak of everybody and we are talking of feminine objects or of women, right? And I say feminine objects like, for example, apples. In Spanish, apples is a feminine noun, okay? Then we would use todas instead of todos, okay? Okay, let's continue. Todos tienen que colaborar. Everybody has to collaborate. So you can see that tener que can be used for any pronoun and for somebody and for everybody, okay? So enough with tener que. Let's move to hay que, which I think I like it more. Hay que comer. Here there is no subject, right? We are just saying that one must eat, right? Generalizing. It's abstract. Hay que comer is, I just wrote must eat because there is no pronoun, no subject. However, it's like saying one must eat. Hay que portarse bien. Hay que portarse bien. Remember that portarse bien is to behave well. This would be like saying one has to behave well, okay? So when we are saying that something has to be done or that something has to be done in a certain way, right? Not that somebody has to do something, but something has to be made like that. We use the expression hay que. And it's very important because there is not another way of saying it in Spanish. So hay que is a very helpful and necessary piece of language in Spanish, okay? So this is the end of the lesson and I hope that you found this useful, okay? Mainly hay que. I hope you can learn how to, you can use it soon, okay? In this Spanish lesson we will see what we call in Spanish verbos reflexivos. Verbos reflexivos or reflexive verbs. I strongly recommend that you watch my previous class, my last class, where we talked about tener que and hay que, which are very useful and important expressions in Spanish. And we will see that, we will review a bit of that at the end using these reflexive verbs, okay? So really, if you haven't watched that lesson before, I strongly recommend you go back to my previous class, okay? So which are the reflexive verbs? Those that have an ending in Spanish. It is an infinitive verb in this case verb ir, that means to go, plus the ending se, that means oneself, okay? Portar se. Portar means to carry. Se, oneself. To carry oneself. Portarse means to behave. Irse, to go oneself, means to leave. Casar is to marry. Casarse is to get married, to marry oneself, to get married, okay? Acostar is to lay something, okay? And acostarse means to lie down or to go to bed, right? But remember that the ending, the se, the reflexive suffix, would mean oneself. Oneself or myself or yourself, himself, okay? So, irse is to leave. Portarse, to behave. Casarse, to get married. And acostarse is to lie down or to go to bed, okay? So let's see the conjugation of these in present tense first for each one of the Spanish subject pronouns, okay? Yo is I, tú is you, él, he, ella, she, usted is you, is the you formal you, okay? So usted should go here because it means you, only that usted is formal, right? But it conjugates the same as he and she, okay? Nosotros is we. Vosotros is you plural used, the word used in Spain, right? Ustedes is also you plural, but the you plural used in Latin America. And ellos means they. And although vosotros and ustedes are synonyms because they are both you plural, however, ustedes conjugates the same as ellos, as they. That's why they are together here, okay? So, see how this works, how a reflexive verb is conjugated, okay? And this will work for all the verbal tenses, okay? Although this is present tense, however, this part will always remain the same for past, present, future, for all the tenses, okay? The only thing that will change is the root of the verb itself that will go conjugated to whatever tense it is, okay? So for the present it is yo me voy, I leave, or yo me porto, and I behave, right? Or yo me caso, I get married, or yo me acuesto, I lay down, or I go to bed, right? So see how this is used. The me, the te, for tú it is te, for él or ella it is se, for nosotros it is nos, for vosotros os, and ustedes and ellos se. So, for example, tú te vas, you leave, right? You can add a predicate. For example, tú te vas a casa, you leave home, right? Él se va, he leaves. Or él se va a la escuela, he leaves to school, right? Él se porta bien, he behaves well. Or ella se casa con Juan, she gets married with Juan. Or usted se acuesta temprano, you formal, right? You go to bed early, okay? Nosotros nos vamos, we leave. Vosotros os vais, you leave. Or vosotros os portáis mal. You behave badly, right? Or vosotros os casáis mañana would be you plural get married tomorrow, right? Ustedes is also you plural but used in Latin America, right? Ustedes se acuestan muy tarde. That means you plural go to bed very late. Or ellos is they. Ellos se casan la semana que viene. They get married the next week, right? Or if we said this in the past, simple past, it would be ellos se casaron la semana pasada. That is, they got married last week. So you can see how this works. For me, for I, it is me, right? And then the verb, the reflexive verb in present tense, or whatever tense you want to conjugate it, right? For tú, the te, okay? For él, ella, or usted, se, okay? Nosotros, nos. Vosotros, os vais, os portáis, os casáis, os acostáis. And ustedes, or ellos, se van, se portan, se casan, or se acuestan. And this works the same for all the reflexive verbs of the Spanish language, and the list is very long, so that's why I just gave you these 4 verbs, reflexive verbs, that were the first that came to my mind, okay? But look, remember last class we talked about tener que and hay que, right? We said that tener que is used for saying somebody has to do something, right? And hay que is something has to be made, but without any subject, right? Without saying somebody. Or it can also be like saying one must do something, okay? So in those cases, when we say tener que or hay que, the verb later goes in infinitive, right? So we don't conjugate it like here. We just leave the verbs in infinitive like here, okay? We use it like this. For example, hay que irse. One must leave, you see? The verb is in infinitive, the verb to leave, okay? One must leave, or this usually means it is time to leave, okay? When you say this, hay que irse, it's like saying it's time to leave. One must leave, okay? Hay que portarse bien. One must behave well, right? Hay que portarse bien. You can see how portarse is in infinitive, right? All the verbs in infinitive, they end in ar, er, or ir, depending on which group they belong to. And then you have the suffix, because it is a reflexive verb, okay? Hay que casarse. When we say hay que casarse, one must marry, it's like saying that a man, a human being, needs to marry, okay? Here it's also in infinitive, right? Hay que acostarse. One has to go to bed. It's like saying it's time to go to bed, okay? Hay que acostarse is a very common expression for saying in Spanish it's time to go to bed, or it's time to sleep, and it means one has to go to bed, right? You can see that there is no subject here. I is a verb in the unique conjugation for when there is no subject, when there is an abstract subject, or when we are generalizing, right? not pointing our finger to anybody. Now, tengo que irme means I have to leave. Again, the verb tengo, that is the verb tener, is conjugated into present tense for yo, for I, right? First person. So the verb here is in infinitive, right? Ellos tienen que casarse. They have to marry. They have to get married, okay? They have to get married. Again, casarse is in infinitive, right? Because tienen is conjugated there, okay? This would be the they have, so the verb have goes conjugated for they, right? For the pronoun they, and then have to get married, casarse, here would be in infinitive, okay? So, as you can guess here, the word ellos, the subject pronoun they, can be omitted, right? Because tienen already implies the subject pronoun, right? So we can simply say tienen que casarse, right? So this is all. I wanted to show you how these reflexive verbs work. Me, te, se, right? This is a structure and the rule for using and conjugating a reflexive verb, and that we will see that in our following lessons. So just remember this, okay? I want to dedicate this lesson to speak about the special case of the feminine nouns that begin with an A, right? We know that the feminine singular article is la. Feminine plural article is las, right? And masculine singular article is el, and masculine plural article is los, right? However, as I mentioned in one of our previous lessons, the feminine nouns that begin with an A, usually they change to the masculine singular article, right? So we will see some examples here of the ones that change to the masculine and some others that do not change, okay? I would say that the ones that change, the upper part of the whiteboard, this would be the majority of the cases, okay? Let's see this example, for instance. El águila. Águila or eagle is a feminine noun, right? However, it begins with an A, and in order to avoid having the la águila, right, the double sound of the A, we change and use the masculine article and we say el águila, right? But when we say it in the plural, the eagles, las águilas, we use the feminine, right? The article that corresponds, actually, because águila is feminine word. But since we have the S of the plural in between of the two A's, it doesn't sound awkward, right? So we go back to the feminine article for the plural. So it is el águila and las águilas. Another example of a feminine noun that we use a masculine article is hambre. Hambre means hunger. And we use el hambre when we speak in feminine, we're using the determined article. Water is agua. We say el agua or las aguas. The speech, the faculty of talking, of speaking, right, is el habla. Habla actually is a feminine noun, right? Somebody can say mucha habla. But when we use the determined article, we have to switch to the masculine and we say él habla. A fairy is hada. Hada, okay, a fairy. We say el hada for the fairy or las hadas for the fairies. Ama de casa is a housewife, right? We say el ama de casa, although ama de casa is feminine word, okay? Why feminine? Because of the word ama. What is ama? Ama is the singular for master, right? Masculine would be amo and feminine would be ama. This word means master. Master of the house would be the word-by-word translation. So this ama de casa means a housewife. El ama de casa or las amas de casa. And our last example is el ala for the wing or las alas for the wings. Okay? This also goes on for the indeterminate article, right? For an eagle, right? An eagle, a fairy, we would say una águila. Sorry, we would say un águila and unas águilas. You see, un is a masculine indeterminate article and unas is a feminine plural indeterminate article. Un hada, unas hadas. Un ala, unas alas. Okay? So this applies for the determined and indeterminate articles. Now let's take a look at these other nouns that also are feminine and begin with an A, right? However, these they do not use the masculine article like the ones in the upper part of the whiteboard. Let's see. La avispa or las avispas for the wasp or the wasps. Abeja is a bee, right? La abeja, las abejas. A torch, the torches. An olive, aceituna. La aceituna, las aceitunas for the olive, the olives. Activity, la actividad, las actividades. Okay? So, what do all these words have in common? They are all feminine nouns and they all begin with an A, right? They all begin with an A. All these feminine nouns begin with A or HA, right? HA, since the H is mute, phonetically it's as if they began with an A. And however, you can see that there is a group, a bigger group, that we need to use a masculine article for the singular, and a smaller group of words where they remain using the feminine singular article, okay? So, if you find a word that is a feminine and begins with an A and it's not in this list, and you are in doubt, then when in doubt, just assume it belongs to this group and use the masculine article for the singular, because this group is bigger than this one, right? Most of the words that begin with A and are feminine, they belong to this group. I see you in the next lesson.
This is our lesson number 122. In this lesson we will see the classification of the Spanish verbs. Spanish verbs can be classified into three big groups. The first one is the verbs that end in ar. This is the biggest group of verbs, and we can say that most of the verbs that end in ar, almost all of them, are regular. There are very few irregular verbs in this group of verbs. Some examples with regular verbs that end in ar are comprar, that means to buy, mirar, to look, hablar, to speak, cambiar, to change. An example with an irregular verb that ends in ar is estar, that means to have or to be. The verb estar can mean to be when we are referring to an impermanent state. For example, if we say I am happy, we say estoy contento. We use the verb estar because happy or sad or raining, all those are impermanent states that can change, and we use the verb estar. However, for permanent states, we use the verb ser. For example, I am John, I am a man, this is a table, this is a window. All these permanent situations or states that cannot change, in Spanish we use the verb ser, which belongs to the next group of verbs. The second group of verbs are those that end in er. For example, these are regular verbs that end in er. Comer, to eat, beber, to drink, or meter, to put in. We also have irregular verbs that end in er, as for example, ser, to be, tener, to have, haber, to have or to be, and ver, to see. The verb ser, as we mentioned before, is used for permanent situations or states, while estar is for impermanent. Tener literally means to have. Haber means to have in the sense of when it is used as an auxiliary verb. And the verb ver means to see, while the verb mirar means to look. Our third group of verbs is those verbs that end in ir. And this group of verbs is the one that has more irregular verbs. Examples with regular verbs that end in ir are vivir, that means to live, sacudir, to shake, decidir, to decide, and pulir, that means to polish. And an example with irregular verbs that end in ir, mentir, to lie, and morir, that means to die. So these are the three groups of verbs in Spanish. In the following lessons, I will show you how these regular verbs are conjugated. I will show you the rule for each one of these three groups of verbs for you to learn how to conjugate most of the verbs in Spanish in the past, in the present, and in the future, and also in the imperative.
In this lesson, we will learn some Spanish conjunctive words, and these are some very frequently used conjunctive words. These are the words pero, that means but, sin embargo, that means however, aunque, that means although, and no obstante, that means nevertheless, or however. Actually, sin embargo and no obstante are synonyms, right? So we'll see some examples using these words and we'll see how they are used. And it's very simple because each one of these words, right, are used in the same way as they are used in English. So we will see, and you'll see how easy it is to use them, okay? In our first example, we say, el día está soleado, pero frío. El día está soleado, pero frío. This means the day is sunny but cold, okay? So, pero means but, and it is used in the same way as but in English, okay? El día está soleado pero frío. The day is sunny but cold, okay? Let's see a second and different use of the word pero, okay? Actually, it still means the same thing, but in a different kind of sentence. This is an exclamation, right? Pero, ¿qué estás haciendo? Pero, ¿qué estás haciendo? This means, but, what are you doing? Pero, ¿qué estás haciendo? But what are you doing? Right? You can see that the word can be translated from English or from Spanish word by word, literally, right? Because as you can see, the word pero is used in the same way as in English. So this is an exclamation, right? As we've seen before, the verb in Spanish already has implicit the subject pronoun, right? That's why here we cannot see the subject, which is implied here. Estás is the word to be, and I can see here that the verb is conjugated for the second person of the singular, for you, right? However, in English we always need to include, to add the subject pronoun, right? You. Here it is implied. Pero si dejas tu trabajo, no podrás pagar las cuentas. Pero si dejas tu trabajo, no podrás pagar las cuentas, right? This also can be literally translated into English. Look how simple it is. But if you quit your job, then actually you can add or omit the word then, both in English and in Spanish. It is the same. You won't be able to pay your bills, right? Podrás is the future tense of the verb poder, which means to be able to, right? Poder is a verb and it is a noun. As a verb, it means to be able to do something, right? And as a noun, poder means power, right? Here, however, it's a verb. Podrás is conjugated in future tense for you, second person of the singular. So you won't be able to pay your bills. Pagar means to pay, right? The verb dejar, right? Here it is conjugated in present tense, right? Dejar means to leave, right? To leave, but also means to quit. Okay? So in Spanish, when we say to quit our job, we say dejar el trabajo. Okay? Pero si dejas tu trabajo, no podrás pagar las cuentas. But if you quit your job, you won't be able to pay your bills. You can see how you can translate the whole sentence literally. Here we have an example. Sorry, let's highlight the word pero, right? Now here we'll see an example with sin embargo, that means however. El mes pasado fui a Europa. Sin embargo, no hice los paseos que había planeado. El mes pasado fui a Europa. Sin embargo, no hice los paseos que tenía planeado. This means last month, or the last month, I went to Europe. However, I did not do the tours, I did not make the tours that I had planned, okay? So last month I went to Europe, however I didn't make the tours that I had planned. The word pasado means past, right? So it refers to last month. Mes means month. The last month I went to Europe, right? So again, the pronoun I is implied in the conjugated verb. Fui is the past tense of the verb to go, ir. However, I did not make the tours that I had planned, okay? Next example. El año que viene me voy a jubilar. No obstante, seguiré yendo a la oficina un tiempo más. El año que viene me voy a jubilar. No obstante, seguiré yendo a la oficina un tiempo más. Here we are using this conjunctive word, no obstante. Actually, it's two words. No obstante is a synonym of sin embargo, right? So it means however or nevertheless. The next year I will retire, right? Jubilar is the verb to retire. Nevertheless, I will continue, right? Seguiré is in future tense. I will continue going to the office a bit longer, right? This literally word by word would translate like a time more, right? Un tiempo más, which means a time more, means a bit longer, okay? Now, see this. Seguiré is verb seguir, to continue in future tense. But we can also use this other type of future as in English. Voy a seguir, okay? We can say, no obstante, voy a seguir yendo. Nevertheless, I will continue going. So this would be the same thing exactly, right? We can say voy a seguir or seguiré. Okay? Same as here. Now, where is it? Here. El año que viene me voy a jubilar. We can say, instead of saying me voy a jubilar, we can say voy a jubilarme. This is the other future, right? And it means the same thing. I will retire. Next example. Aunque está soleado, hace frío. And here I have rewritten the first sentence, okay? Only that in the first sentence we were using the connecting word pero, that means but. In this other case, we are using the connecting word aunque, that means although, right? So, aunque está soleado, hace frío. Although it is sunny, it is cold, right? So here we were saying the day is sunny but cold, and here we are rewriting the sentence and saying although it is sunny, it is cold. Or we can also say está soleado aunque hace frío. This means it is sunny although it is cold. Okay? So as you can see, the connecting word aunque, right, this one here, means although, and it is also used in Spanish in the same way that although is used in English, right? So you can, there is no complexity here. The same way you use one word in English, you are using this one in Spanish sentences, okay? So you don't have to switch your mind to use this. Another example with aunque. Aunque fui a Europa, no hice los paseos que tenía planeados. Aunque fui a Europa, no hice los paseos que tenía planeados. Here, I'm rewriting the same sentence that we have here. Okay? Here we said, el mes pasado fui a Europa, sin embargo no hice los paseos que había planeado. And here I'm saying, aunque fui a Europa, no hice los paseos que tenía planeados. So here it was, last month I went to Europe, however I didn't make the tours that I had planned. And here we are saying, although I went to Europe, I didn't make the tours that I had planned. You see how we rewrite the sentence. Instead of using this time the connecting word sin embargo or however, we are using the word aunque, that means although, okay? But it's the same sentence. We can also put the although in the middle of the sentence and say, el mes pasado fui a Europa, aunque no hice los paseos que había planeado. This would mean, last month I went to Europe, although I didn't make the tours that I had planned. Okay? So, you can see aunque is used in the same way as although is in English. So all these four connecting words won't present any difficulty for you to use them in sentences, right? Pero, that means but. Sin embargo, that means however. Aunque, that means although. And no obstante, that means nevertheless. So with this we finish this lesson, and I hope you have added these 4 new words to your collection of words. So this will help you to build more sentences and phrases in Spanish. I see you in next class. In this class I will show you these 2 new words in Spanish. The word con, that means with, and the word sin, that means without. The spelling of these words is C-O-N and S-I-N. Okay? Remember that this word, the I, is in Spanish pronounced I. Okay? And the letter I in Spanish is E. Right? So, the words con and sin do not present any difficulty either because they are used the same as in English, okay? We'll see some examples here. Estoy con Pedro. Estoy con Pedro. This means I am with Pedro, okay? Or Peter. Some of these sentences, I have translated them in English in a way that may sound a bit awkward, but because I'm trying to translate in a way that can be more straightforward with the way we write in Spanish, okay? So that you can see a word-by-word translation as far as it is possible, okay? So, second example. Me serviré arroz con leche. Another way for saying serviré, which is the future of the verb servir, is voy a servir. Okay, this is more similar to the way we conjugate the future in English, right? So we can say me serviré arroz con leche or me voy a servir arroz con leche. This means I will help myself arroz con leche. Arroz con leche literally means rice with milk, okay? But arroz con leche is the name of a dessert that I think it's originally from India, and it's I think in English you call it rice pudding. It's this sweet rice that's boiled with a lot of milk, and you eat it cold and with some cinnamon on top, right? So that is called arroz con leche in Spanish. So here we are using the word con, that means with. Estoy sin dinero. Estoy sin dinero. I am without money. I am without money. That is the literal word-by-word translation. Estoy sin dinero. Here we are using the word without. And instead of using the word money, we can also use efectivo. Efectivo. Okay? Efectivo, this is an F, has two meanings. Efectivo means effective as an adjective, right? And efectivo as a noun, it means cash. Okay? So we can say estoy sin efectivo, it means I am without cash. Another example using the word without, sin. No puedo llevarte. Estoy sin el auto. No puedo llevarte. Estoy sin el auto. This means I cannot take you. So, which part of this verb is take and which one is you? This part is a verb to take, and this here, the suffix, is the you. Take you. Llevarte. Okay? So, and this is to be able to, right? This is the present tense conjugation for the first person, for I, for yo. Remember, the verb is poder. That means to be able to. I can not take you. I am without the car, right? Another example using without, sin. Sin dinero no puedo pagar las cuentas. Sin dinero no puedo pagar las cuentas. This means without money I can not pay the bills. Okay? Las cuentas means the bills. Here we have another example using con and sin. And here it's a little bit different because the word with you, right? It's the word con, but it forms a new word, contigo, right? And without you, sin ti. It's two words. So, iré contigo o sin ti. Iré contigo o sin ti. This means I will go with you or without you. Okay? So, with and without, you don't say with, as the same way you wouldn't say with I, you would say with me. In Spanish you would say conmigo or contigo, or sin ti, or sin mí, okay? You don't say con yo or con tú, you say conmigo or contigo. So this here, iré, is a future tense of the verb to go, that is the verb ir. And since in Spanish we have two ways of conjugating the future, we can also say voy a ir. Remember when we learned the future tense in Spanish, we said that we use a verb, the auxiliary verb to go, voy a, and later the verb in infinitive that we want to conjugate, ir, okay? Same as in English, we use a verb to will, that is the auxiliary verb for the future tense. In Spanish, we can say voy a ir, I will go, okay? So, iré contigo o sin ti, I will go with you or without you. Another example. En otoño, los árboles están sin hojas. I missed the tilde here. And here too, I missed the tilde. En otoño, los árboles están sin hojas. This means, in autumn, the trees are without leaves, right? Or without the leaves. Sin means without. And en verano, los árboles están con hojas. This means in summer, the trees are with leaves, okay? So, in autumn without the leaves, in summer with the leaves, okay? Check here, I have forgotten to write the tilde. If I miss the tilde here, if I omit the tilde, instead of saying están, this would be read están, which doesn't mean anything in Spanish. There is no word in Spanish called están. So this should be written with a tilde, están, with the accent in the last syllable. So let's read this again. En otoño los árboles están sin hojas, and en verano los árboles están con hojas. Okay? Sin, without, con, with. So we will practice using the adverb tan. T-A-N. That means so. The adverb tan has these variations, tanto or tanta for masculine and for feminine, singular or uncountable, and tantos and tantas for countable and plural, okay? So, tanto tanta means so much. Tantos tantas means so many, okay? Also, tantos and tantas, as you can see, the S at the end of the word is plural, right? These are countable. The singular for countable is tan, right? And tanto tanta is just uncountable. We will see some examples here so we can understand well and clearly when we have to use each case. So in blue I have the sentence in Spanish, in black the sentence in English. Let's begin with the first example. This is an exclamation. Es tan bueno. Es tan bueno. This means he is so good. Está tan lejos que no lo puedo ver. Está tan lejos que no lo puedo ver. This means it is so far away, or just far, that I cannot see it. Okay? Look at the order of the words here. I can not see it. Okay? Puedo is a conjugation of the verb to be able to, okay, or to can. Ver is the verb to see. Take a look at this. Here we say he is so good, and here we say it is so far away, right? So what makes us determine whether this is a he and this is a it? Just the context, okay? Because here actually we are omitting the pronoun, because the pronoun is implicit in the verb. The verb tells me this is, the subject is the third person of the singular, he, she, or it. So, since here I'm saying so good, I assume it is a human being, then I assume it is a he or a she, right? And here, it is so far away. I'm assuming it is so far away that I cannot see it. So I am assuming here it is an object, okay? But it could also be a person. Now something else. Here in English, these two translate using the verb to be, right? He is so good and it is so far away, the verb to be. But in Spanish, I'm using two different verbs. The verb ser and the verb estar, okay? The first sentence is a verb ser. The second one, verb estar. I've spoken of this difference before. We use the verb ser in Spanish as the verb to be in English when we're talking about an intrinsic feature or characteristic of the subject. When it is something impermanent, or usually impermanent, that can be changed, then we use the verb estar, right? First case ser, second case estar. Let me give you an example. An intrinsic feature can be I am John, for example, because I am John and I will always be John. I am a man, right? Man is something that doesn't change, right? I was born a man and I will always be a man. In Spanish, for these cases, we use the verb ser. Yo soy Rodrigo. Yo soy John. Yo soy un hombre. Okay? Also, the characteristic or the feature goodness, it's also considered intrinsic, right? So in Spanish we say that somebody is good, he is, él es bueno, okay? Es bueno, verb ser. But if it is something, a feature that is mutable, that can change, like being happy, being sad, okay, that's not impermanent, then we use the verb estar. In Spanish I would say, yo estoy contento, or feliz, I am happy, or yo estoy triste, sad, okay? So in this case, something is far away. That is not something permanent because the distance can change. So we also use verb estar for something that is impermanent, okay? So both ser and estar, they translate in English as the verb to be. But depending on the case, we use in Spanish either verb ser or verb estar. Next example. Este vestido es tan lindo cuanto caro. This dress is so beautiful as it is expensive, right? These are expensive. These are different examples using the adverb tan, which means so, right? In this case, it would be as, right? As beautiful as it is expensive, right? Or so beautiful as it is expensive. In Spanish, tan means so. But here we can see three different uses of the same adverb. Now look at this. Este vestido es tan lindo. This dress is so beautiful. Here we are using the verb ser, verb to be, like verb ser. Why? Because beauty is considered something intrinsic, right? It's not something mutable like being dirty or being clean. Then we would use verb estar. We would say está tan sucio, it is so dirty. But we're talking about beauty that is considered intrinsic. Then we use verb ser. We say es tan lindo. So beauty is considered intrinsic, same as goodness. Está tan nublado que creo que va a llover. Está tan nublado que creo que va a llover. It is so cloudy that I think that it will rain. Okay? Here it's another example using the adverb tan. And look at this. It is so cloudy. Cloudy, the state of the weather condition, is something very mutable, right? It's not permanent. So we use the verb estar instead of the verb ser. That's why here we use the verb estar. It is so cloudy. Hay tanta gente hoy. Hay tanta gente hoy. This means there are so many people today. There are so many people today. You can see tanta and tanto, depending feminine or masculine, right? Means so much, right? So much. Uncountable, not countable. The thing is that in Spanish, the word for people, which is gente, is not countable. That's why gente is used tanta, because it's feminine and because it's not countable. That's why we use so much, okay? Hay means there is or there are, right? This single word here works for both cases. There is or there are. So, there are so many people today. Okay? Next example. Bebí tanta agua que perdí el apetito. Bebí tanta agua que perdí el apetito. This means I drank so much water that I lost my appetite, or I lost the appetite. In Spanish we don't say I lost my appetite, we say I lost the appetite, okay? The appetite. So here tanta is feminine for so much, because water is not countable, right? And since water is a feminine noun in Spanish, we use tanta with a at the end. Hay tantos mosquitos afuera que prefiero quedarme en casa. Hay tantos mosquitos afuera que prefiero quedarme en casa. This means there are so many mosquitoes outside or outdoors that I prefer to stay at home. Okay? See that this time we are using so many for masculine, right? Because mosquitoes is a countable noun, right? We can count them. So we use tantos here, okay? So many. And of course, it's masculine because mosquitoes is a masculine word, okay? Hay tantas cosas que no consigo encontrar nada. Hay tantas cosas que no consigo encontrar nada. This means there are so many things that I cannot, or I manage not to find anything. Okay? Conseguir means to can, or to be able to, or to manage to. Él come con tanto gusto. Él come con tanto gusto. This means he eats with so much pleasure, right? So here, since pleasure, we cannot count pleasure, right? It's not countable. Then we use tanto, which means so much. Of course, gusto is a masculine noun. That's why we use tanto and not tanta. While here, cosas, which means things, is a feminine noun. That's why we use tantas. Also because things are countable, right? So we use tantas. So many in feminine, right? And our last example is hay tanto para hacer que es mejor empezar cuanto antes. Hay tanto para hacer que es mejor empezar cuanto antes. This means there is, remember that I means there is or there are, right? There is so much to do that it is better to start as soon as possible. Okay? So, that single word means there is or there are. Okay, tanto means so much, masculine, okay? So much, so not countable. Para hacer means to do. Para hacer, to do. That it is better to start. Cuanto antes means as soon as possible. So this is an expression these two words go together and literally means as soon as possible. So when we are in a hurry, when we want to transmit sense of urge, we say cuanto antes. When we want to ask something or request something as soon as possible, we will say I need it cuanto antes. Okay? So this is the end. So we have tan, we have tanto, tanta for not countable, and tantos and tantas for countable.